Imagine owning a lake, only to have someone march up, point at your boat, and demand you move it because they think they run the place. That's exactly what happened when a neighborhood HOA, Karen, tried to humiliate a man at his own lake. But what she didn't know was that he wasn't just another visitor. He was the owner. And when the truth came out, her entire empire of control came crashing down. Move your boat. This isn't your place. Those sharp words cut through the calm afternoon air as David Carter tied his small fishing boat to the dock. The sun shimmered on the water, and the gentle ripples promised him the peace he came to the lake for every weekend. But instead of relaxation, he was greeted with hostility. David was no ordinary visitor. He was a successful entrepreneur, a man who had quietly built a life of comfort and recently purchased this very lake to escape the chaos of the city. Fishing was his therapy, his retreat, his moment of stillness. But that peace was about to be shattered. Striding toward him with quick, confident steps came Linda, the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood HOA. Her sunglasses sat high on her nose, her arms crossed with authority, and her expression carried the kind of smug confidence that only someone used to bossing others around could wear. To Linda, David wasn't a property owner. He wasn't even a neighbor. He was just another outsider daring to intrude on what she believed was her lake. "You can't park here," Linda barked, her tone dripping with disdain. "This lake is private property and the HOA has rules. You'll need to remove that boat immediately." David, still calm, let the words hang in the air. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at the water, then back at her, almost amused at her arrogance. Finally, with a polite smile, he asked, "And who exactly says I can't?" Linda tilted her head, smirking. She was enjoying the moment. "The HOA, and I'm in charge here. If you don't move that boat, I'll call security and you'll regret it." The confidence in her voice was absolute. To her, this was just another victory in a long history of intimidating people into submission. But what Linda didn't realize was that she had just challenged the wrong man. Because the truth was simple. This wasn't her lake. This wasn't even the HOA's lake. It was David's. He had the papers to prove it. And soon Linda's false authority would come crashing down around her in the most humiliating way imaginable. What Linda thought would be another routine power play was about to turn into the biggest mistake of her HOA career. Linda wasn't just any neighbor, she was the classic HOA Karen. The type who carried a clipboard like it was a sword and treated bylaws like holy scripture. She lived for rules, fines, and intimidation. For years, residents had suffered under her reign. Grass too long? Fine. A lawn gnome not in theme? Fine. Leave your car parked in the wrong spot for even 2 minutes? Another fine. People grumbled, but most kept quiet. After all, who wanted to fight with the HOA president who seemed to thrive on confrontation? Linda had built her identity around control. And her crown jewel, the thing she loved most, was the HOA fishing club. Every weekend, she and her close circle of friends gathered at the lake, laughing, drinking, and acting like they were the rightful owners of the water. They bossed around anyone who came near, barking rules about exclusive access and member rights. Families who wanted to fish were shooed away. Strangers were treated like trespassers. To Linda, the lake wasn't community property. It was her kingdom. So when she spotted David's boat calmly tied to the dock, she didn't even stop to ask who he was. She assumed he was just another outsider who needed to be educated. "Look," Linda said, this time softening her tone with a false smile. "If you want to fish here, you'll need to get permission from me and the HOA board." She tilted her head, speaking slowly as though she were talking to a child. "There are membership fees, rules, regulations. We can't just let anyone drop a boat and start fishing." David raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "Membership fees? To fish here?" "That's right," Linda said proudly, puffing herself up. She crossed her arms, radiating smugness. "And frankly, I doubt you can afford it." The arrogance in her voice cut through the air like a knife. It wasn't just the words. It was the tone. The way she looked him up and down as if she'd already judged and dismissed him. A few neighbors nearby, out for a stroll, paused to watch. They exchanged quiet glances, shaking their heads. Everyone knew Linda's routine. But this time something felt different. The man wasn't flustered or intimidated. He wasn't apologizing or making excuses. He was just calm, almost amused, and deep down those neighbors sensed the storm that was about to hit. Linda had no idea she was seconds away from humiliating herself on a level she couldn't begin to imagine. David stood tall, his calm words carrying more weight than Linda's entire tirade. "Actually," he said slowly, "I don't need your permission, because this isn't your lake. It's mine." For a moment, silence hung in the air. Linda blinked rapidly, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Excuse me?" she finally croaked, her voice losing the sharp edge it once had. "I own this lake," David repeated, this time with deliberate clarity. He reached into his bag and pulled out a neatly folded document. Slowly, he unfolded it, revealing the official deed. The county seal gleamed under the afternoon sun. Signatures from lawyers and county officials lined the bottom, leaving no doubt. The neighbors leaned in, whispering. A few gasps echoed across the dock. Linda's face drained of color. She stuttered, That can't be right. The HOA manages this lake." David shook his head gently, almost pitying her. "No, Linda. The HOA thought it managed the lake because the previous owner allowed it. But I bought this property last month, which means every fishing permit, every membership fee, and every so-called rule you've been bragging about comes from me now." A ripple of laughter spread through the small crowd. Someone muttered, "Oh, this is going to be good," while another whispered. Finally, someone shut her down. Linda's sunglasses slid down her nose as she sputtered, desperate to regain control. "This is outrageous. The board wasn't informed. I should have been told." David's calm smile didn't waver. "Funny thing about private property, Linda. The owner doesn't have to ask the HOA for permission." He tucked the deed back into his bag and added, "So if anyone here needs permission, it's you. And frankly, I'm revoking it." The neighbors chuckled louder now, some outright grinning. The woman who had ruled the community with fines and threats was being stripped of her power in real time. Linda's jaw dropped. For the first time in years, she had no comeback, no rule to cite, no threat to throw. She was standing powerless on the very dock she once claimed as her throne. And David? He simply adjusted his hat, turned back toward his boat, and cast his line into the water, calm, collected, and undeniably in charge. But David wasn't finished. He kept his eyes locked on Linda, his calm tone cutting sharper than any outburst. "And since you've been charging people money to fish on my property, without my consent, that ends today." The words echoed across the dock, carried by the gentle ripple of the lake. Linda's jaw clenched as she tried to regain her footing. You can't just shut us down." "We've built this community. We've worked hard to establish order here." David tilted his head, unimpressed. "Order, is that what you call it? What you've done is bully your neighbors. You've fined them for nonsense. You've humiliated them over tiny things like grass length or where they park. And worst of all, you charged them money to use a lake that was never yours." Gasps rippled through the crowd. People nodded, murmuring in agreement. They had all lived under Linda's thumb for far too long. David's voice grew firm, steady, like a judge passing a sentence. "So let me be crystal clear. The fishing club is disbanded. Effective immediately." For a moment, silence. Then a wave of cheers broke out. The neighbors who had once bowed to Linda's power now erupted with joy. A middle-aged man at the back shouted, "About time!" His voice carried, sparking more applause. A woman near the dock clapped her hands together. "We were tired of her bossing us around anyway," she said, her tone full of relief. Others joined in, some laughing, some shaking their heads at the absurdity of it all. It was as though years of bottled-up frustration had finally been released. Linda's face turned crimson. Her sunglasses, now perched awkwardly on the edge of her nose, slipped completely off as she sputtered. "You can't, this isn't fair. I gave this neighborhood structure." But no one was listening. The crowd's energy had shifted. They weren't afraid anymore. They weren't under her control. David gave a small nod to the neighbors, his calm smile returning. "This lake is for everyone to enjoy. Families, kids, friends, no fees, no intimidation. Just peace." The applause grew louder. For the first time, Linda stood truly powerless, surrounded by the very people she once controlled, people who now saw her for what she really was. And in that moment, David Carter wasn't just the owner of the lake. He was the man who had freed the community from its self-appointed tyrant. Over the next few weeks, the neighborhood underwent a transformation no one had thought possible. The lake, once guarded by Linda and her fishing club like some private fortress, blossomed into a place of freedom and joy. Families brought picnic blankets and baskets spreading out beneath shady trees. Children ran along the shore, skipping stones into the water and laughing without fear of being scolded. Couples took evening walks hand in hand, enjoying the peace that had been denied to them for so long. And right at the heart of it all was David. Though he had every right to simply enjoy his property privately, he chose to share it. He often joined in, teaching kids how to cast a line or sitting with the older residents as they swapped stories. Slowly but surely, he became more than just the man who owned the lake. He became part of the community itself, a neighbor everyone respected and appreciated. Meanwhile, Linda's world unraveled. Her once unshakable authority in the HOA crumbled overnight. She stormed into meetings, waving papers and demanding obedience, but the neighbors no longer feared her. They had seen her exposed for what she really was. She tried filing legal threats against David, but the paperwork spoke for itself. The deed, the signatures, the county's approval. Every attempt bounced back at her, leaving her weaker than before. Eventually, Linda had no choice but to step down from her HOA position. It wasn't just about losing her title. It was about losing the power she once lorded over everyone. For the first time in years, the neighborhood no longer bent to her will. One golden evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the lake with streaks of orange and pink, David sat on the dock, quietly watching the rippling water. A neighbor approached him and asked the question everyone had wondered. "David, why didn't you press charges? Why not ban her from the lake completely?" David gave a small, knowing smile. Because the best lesson isn't punishment, it's exposure. People like her thrive on control. But once everyone sees the truth, their power disappears. The story of David and Linda spread beyond their little community. Neighbors told friends who told more friends until it became a modern-day parable, a reminder to anyone tempted to misuse authority. True power doesn't come from intimidation or control. It comes from respect. And respect, once earned, is untouchable. And that's how one HOA Karen learned the hard way that power built on intimidation never lasts. Respect will always win in the end. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story like this one. Let me know in the comments, have you ever dealt with a Karen in your neighborhood?